Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm really glad to be here and grateful to the GreenPort Congress organizers for inviting me. I am particularly happy to come back to Copenhagen and once again see that Copenhagen-Malmö cooperation is working very well and is in many respects a success story. Before starting on our, I would say, conference topic and discussion, I would like maybe to say a few words on FEPORT. FEPORT is representing the private port operator, and we have within our organization both company members, some global ones, but also national associations. Some figures just to say who we are and who we are representing. FEPORT is more than 1,200 companies. It's 4 billion investments, 4 billion euros investments, both in equipment and in infrastructure. Companies employing more than 220,000 port workers. But also its contribution to GDP and its to 2013 figures, 68 billion euros. It's indirect jobs up to 1,050,000 jobs. And it's, in terms of throughput, 80 million TEUs in 2013 and more than 2.7 billion tons. Now, when we talk about our activities, very often we think about container, but actually our members handle all type of cargo, and it's then a variety of operations on our terminals. And this is something that is very important for us to focus upon because the challenges are very different and of a different nature. Now, when we talk about, and the theme of the conference today is about how the port, what is the role of the port in the logistic chain. Obviously, ports play an important role because they are both nodes within the transport corridors, but also points of entry and exit of cargo and passengers. Therefore, they are certainly contributing, and Isabelle mentioned it already, an efficient and environmental friendly role in the intermodal transport chain. Now, my presentation is an attempt to answer some questions. Those questions are we as port stakeholders, and when I say we, I'm including both private port operators but also public authorities, achieving and acting towards an efficient, environmental friendly intermodal transport chain, and my presentation will attempt to answer these first questions. Does an efficient, environmental friendly intermodal transport chain depend on the sole implication of port stakeholders? I will try to answer that one too. Or does it imply the commitment of other actors? Probably yes. If yes, who and how? Now, I'm not going to enter into the details of this slide. Probably the next picture will explain what is the role of private operators in ports. We are the one investing in the green facilities, meaning we are investing in superstructure, although in the recent year we are more and more investing also in infrastructure. And I think that one important message I would like to deliver, if we want to attract more private investment in ports, more private operators, the rules have to be clear, meaning that we will not have private investment if we have a distortion of competition from publicly subsidized companies. I think this is a very important point. Now, our companies are investing in buildings, straddle carriers, cranes, and as I mentioned earlier, it's an amount which equals 40 billion euros during the last 10 years. Environment, so it's the topic of today. We are investing, of course, a lot in environment and environment-friendly facilities, but also equipment. Some keywords that are part of our agenda, but also of yours, most probably. All those are, for us, a daily priority and a daily objective. To start with, I would like to give two examples of two FEPORT member companies, actually Eurogate, but also Noatum, who are introducing some significant, I would say, improvements. And I will also refer to two joint initiatives from groups of members within FEPORT. To start with greenhouse emissions. Since 2012 already, we have had many companies, I would say the majority of the container lift at the European level, that is APMT terminals, Conchip Italia, DP World, ECT, Eurogate, HHLA, Hutchinson, and PSA, who joined to establish together what we call the EIG guidelines. And those guidelines have been, since June 2015, been endorsed by FEPORT. Those guidelines are, in fact, a voluntary methodology which allows container terminal to calculate their CO2 emissions on a periodical basis. When we try to calculate those emissions, we, of course, are calculating and focusing on the emissions that we are producing, meaning that we are accountable in the port area for 15% of the emissions in the port, not more. This is what is the percentage of emissions in port that is produced by terminal operators. How does the methodology work? In fact, its key component, total of emissions of a terminal and the number of containers. And we can establish then the total emissions in line with the protocol, the GIG protocol. I'm not going to enter into the details. Probably some of our members will, in the two coming days, go beyond this, but just maybe underline something that is important from our perspective. We do not need probably to have more regulation in this field, but what we would very much appreciate is that the European institutions support the industry initiative, particularly when they are voluntary. We didn't wait for anything, any kind of regulation. We went for it, and what we need is just support and, I would say, more promotion on the side of the European institution for industry initiatives. More keywords that are important and at this moment for us. Energy efficiency. And then I will mention what Eurogate, one of our companies, is actually doing today. So it's a bundle of measures. So it's not an exhaustive list, but just to give you an idea. It's about heat and power production. They are trying to have power plants to have produced their own energy. They are using and recycling wooden dunnage to produce heat. It's also about wind turbines, just also to have produced their electricity. Last but not least, it's using hybrid and hydrogen drives for LNG vehicles. Now, green cranes, another initiative from Noatum, and this is actually something that we like very much and we would like very much to see more in the future. It's a collaborative approach involving port authorities, port operators, cities, and the European Commission. And it's a project which is absolutely going very well. Actually, this is the time frame. We started from theory and modeling, and we will reach full deployment in 2020. This is typically something that we would like to see more in the future and that we are looking for as a best practice. Now, last, it's a very recent one. It's I would say, at an individual basis, but this is something that is also work in showing that the implication is also at the level of the company, at the level of the business unit. Recently, beginning of September, we have had a joint initiative from a number of global companies, which are actually all part of FEPORT, and who decided, and the Port of Rotterdam, who decided to launch a campaign of sensibilization within their own companies, just to incite business units to go for more green initiatives at a very, very local level. So it's about education, it's about planting trees, it's about recycling, it's about having some educational tools, etc. But just to show that it's not necessarily big, I would say, project, it can be also very educative and at a very individual, I would say, level. Now, the conclusion. I started to say that I will try and I will attempt to answer a few questions. So I'm back to those to see whether we can actually answer them, or I have been able to give some hints and ideas on how we could probably answer those questions. The port stakeholders are already committed, and I think we are both as within, be it for port authorities or private port operators, we are committed and we are doing all what we can. But the responsibility cannot be only on our shoulders, especially when we talk about the logistic chain. If we talk about the logistic chain, it involves more stakeholders. And I think the first presentation from the CEO of Copenhagen Malmö used already the term holistic approach and the need to involve more players. So the success will depend on other important actors of the transport chain and beyond. Who? Cities, region, shipping lines, truck companies, freight forwarders, shippers, port equipment manufacturers, port workers also, and EU institutions. How? Certainly not by regulating more, because this is just not an exhaustive, but some of the texts that are applicable to the port sector. We do already have a legislative framework. So probably what we don't need is to have more, but start by disseminating good practices and also assessing the impact of existing legislation. How? Again, probably by, as I mentioned it earlier, there are some good projects, innovative projects that are at this moment deployed. We need more support and real dialogue between the EU institutions when they start to fund projects with the concerned stakeholders. I think that the industry is capable to give the terms of reference of its needs. And it's important that EU institutions actually keep in close and work in close contact with the private stakeholders. And of course the port authorities, but all the people who are involved in those projects. Who are the others and how they can contribute? We need the shippers and the freight forwarders on board. Why? Because we need them probably to be more active in applying more green procurement themselves. And this is something very important, because the virtuous circle has to be a circle. It cannot be just one way. We need them also to provide accurate and on-time cargo information, because if we want to avoid delays in ports and congestion, we need to have accurate information coming in. Last, we need dialogue between all actors of the maritime logistic chain, because this is important to avoid any congestion and peak or low activity in ports. We need to avoid congestion on roads, and this is something that we are really looking forward at FEPORT, because we think that it's only through, I would say, a holistic approach that we can achieve success. Stopping at the doors of ports won't solve the whole problem. We need to go much beyond. That's why next December 3rd, we are going, all industry stakeholders association are going to meet to discuss the future challenges and how we are going to cope with them so that it becomes a win-win situation for all. Thank you very much for your attention.